Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this latest episode of the Human Factor Security Podcast, where I'm joined by an old friend who I haven't seen in a long time. Welcome to the show, Anna Collard.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. It's so good to be here.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. And how are you? How are things over in Africa at the moment?
Yeah, good. I mean, like the rest of the world, I guess it's sort of a crazy time. We've just come out of a really, I guess, one of the most hectic lockdowns in South Africa, where in the beginning we weren't allowed to even leave the house. Even if you had dogs, you weren't allowed to walk the dogs. No alcohol sale allowed. So it was really quite dramatic.
Oh, that would be bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, the numbers have gone down, and we're now in our summer, so things are looking up a bit. But just watching what's happening in Europe and sort of the rest of the world, we are nervous that there may be a second wave. So, but apart from that, good. You know,
Now, we
really.
need to do a proper introduction, Anna, because there might be people who don't know exactly who you are or what it is you do. So, do you want to just tell us what your role is at the moment, what you do, and who you are?
Yes, so yeah, my name is Anna Collard, and I've got about 20 years experience in the cybersecurity industry. Currently, my role is it's a very long American title, but it's SVP for Content Strategy and Evangelist for Know Before Africa.
That
And
is
basically,
a long title. How do you fit that on a business card? Do you
yeah,
abbreviate?
it's very new. Like I've only started this role in September, but it actually is it's amazing because it allows me to do what I like most, which is research and coming up with new content ideas. And then the evangelist side is sort of what I've been doing on the side anyway, like talking at conferences and, like writing articles and things like that. So yeah,
That's
before
where we met. We met at a conference in Joburg a couple of years ago, I think it was.
that's
When
right. Yes.
Yeah, because that was when you were MD of Popcorn.
Exactly. Yeah, and I loved your talk, by the way, Jenny.
Oh, that's very sweet. But I remember that because I remember you came and and it was just it was such a friendly atmosphere, but it was a big conference. It was a big
Yeah.
stage to be on, wasn't it? I mean, is that typical? Is the events like that in Africa? I mean, before the pandemic, is it an expanding industry in Africa or across the continent, or how's it work?
I think it definitely has. I mean, the Joburg event that we met, that was I think the IT Web Security Summit, and that's been around for a couple of years, and it's sort of one of the must events where all the vendors are there, and they usually get really good speakers from overseas, like such as yourself. So it's like one of the events where you have to just be there, But since I suppose since COVID, everything went virtual and things have changed a lot. So I'd be interested to see how things will be next year when, I don't know, when and if things ever go back to normal. I know that, we've been to Kenya also about 2 years ago, and there was a nice big event, but um, it is different. Like if you move into Nigeria or Kenya, the events are on a different scale to, like, let's say Johannesburg or Europe.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously it's the continent, and it's huge variations, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah.
if the continent as it becomes more digitized, and particularly now with lockdown and everything's moved online, do you think that I mean, there's obviously going to be more demand for all sorts of digital business, so there's going to be more demand for cybersecurity. So, do you see the two sort of growing at the same rate, or is the security side kind of lagging behind a little bit, like it is, I would say, like it was in other places up until a few years ago?
I think that generally, so there are vast differences depending on the industry you're in and also the country. So in certain countries in Africa, Africa is so diverse. Like you have Mauritius, for example, that is quite modern actually, and probably mature in terms of their regulative environment and the kind of proactivity that the government takes to make their island a smart island and hence a more secure island. So you would actually, if you Google Mauritius, they're in the top 6 of the more sort of secure, or at least on paper, societies. And
Yeah.
then move into other countries, and it's very much well, they have bigger problems to fight. There's poverty, unemployment, war zones. So cyber security is very low down the priority list, and so is there's no regulation in place, no awareness. So depending on which country you move in, and then also the industry. So the finance banking industry, they obviously are, as everywhere, they're more sort of the early adopters and quite mature, and then you have retail and other areas that are lagging behind. But yeah, and generally I would say that we definitely are still very far behind from the rest of the world in average, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And unfortunately, with and I mean, unfortunately, fortunately, but Africa is sort of on this massive digital leap. Like there's a lot of green fields, because we haven't had the infrastructure in place. So there's some stats that say within the next 2 years, the number of connected people that are coming online is going to double. So we will have a billion people coming online. Most of them will use the mobile devices.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. It's mostly going to be mobile phones, I guess, isn't it? I mean, and that for me, and for a lot of the time when I've spoken with people in the industry, that presents a bigger problem almost than a laptop or whatever, because people don't see it as a computer necessarily, so they don't put the security in, right?
Exactly. And on top of that, this is also very interesting that it's not just percentage wise, but actual numbers. Like the Southern Africa region is the region with the most financial transactions being conducted on mobile devices. So it's more than in Asia, more than anywhere else in the world. And all these people that are coming online are, well, not all, but a lot of them will be first-time users. So they have never been exposed to even a computer before. So the level of awareness and understanding is very, very low. And at the same time, you see how criminals, they just, they're shifting their attention towards emerging economies. They know it's easy to operate in Africa because we don't have the regulations. There is that sort of high digitization or the growth in digitization, people doing the financial transactions and having very little or no awareness. So that's actually one of the discussion points that we will touch on at the African Cybersecurity Culture Conference, is to talk with the telcos, some of the leading telcos like MTN, Airtel, Telecom SA, to address, well, what can we do, like between the telecommunications sector, the financial sector, and the security industry to solve this problem? Because it is something that we have to do together, right? Like the bad guys, there's all these reports about more sort of mobile malware and banking trojans and all that stuff coming along. And if, let's face it, I mean, like if you were a criminal, like even my husband who's in wine, he said, well, if I was a criminal, I would go into secondhand smartphone sales and just plant all my my mobile malware on there and sell it into Africa.
You need to watch him. Tell him to stay in wine. But next time for one day when I manage to get back, we go and look at it. But yeah, no, it's right. I think I know you though, and I know you've got that like entrepreneurial nature, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about that side of what you do and who you are. But I do, when you say a lot of people when they first get their phone, that's the first time that they've really sort of been online and done these transactions. On the one hand, that is a strange situation. But on the other hand, it's such a big opportunity, because if we teach them security alongside when they first get when they first get the phone, then that's an opportunity, isn't it? So that the minute they start using it, they know about security. That might embed a little bit into the culture. Do you see that as an opportunity as well as, I mean, obviously it's a huge threat, but.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's actually something that's quite funny. We discussed exactly that point because, I don't know if you're aware, but KnowBe4 bought a company called Culture. They're from Norway.
Oh, and Kai. I know Kai really well.
Oh, Kai, yes.
Yeah, so I love Kai. I had a discussion and Amy, Kai. Right? Yeah.
And the Viking. And he is. We kind of discussed why is it, because they're doing these culture assessments where they measure an organization's security culture based on 7 dimensions, like measurable, or more from the sociologist side. Like you can measure your attitude, your responsibility, how much do you know about security, all of these kind of things. And Africa actually scored quite high compared to the rest of the world, you know, and I was like, this is like really strange, you know. And then we discussed that maybe it is because of the greenfield environment, we never had the time to get used to bad habits like you maybe have done in Europe, you know, where you grew up with computers in the, you know, like, I don't know, since the 80s, and who needs a password, and, you know.
Well,
like
it wasn't a thing. I worked in a company, and we all got given our, we used to have dumb terminals that were just databases, and then they swapped those and we actually started to get email and things. And I remember the day that we all got them. I worked for a big telecoms company in the UK, and I remember the day we got them. It's got like, this is how you log in. So you log in is like jennyappbigcompany.co.uk. That's your username, and everyone's password is password one. And we all got the same password, and it was just, and you're right, and then the lesson started to be learned when, you know, I remember a guy I worked with whose name, let me make up a name, look around, he's probably called David, so let's call him David. And, you know, and I walk in and he's on my computer because his computer didn't work. And of course, he's just logged into mine because password one's the password. And it wasn't until things like that happened that you started to think. And I remember emailing IT and saying, can I change my password from password one? And getting an email back saying, why do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Whereas in Africa, if this is the first time that they're getting that tech, and at the moment, you know, at the same time they get the tech, they get told, now you've got security is a thing. So there's the tech, but remember that, you know, I mean, I'd love it that children and teenagers, the first time that they get the computer or their device, they also get that awareness. It just as if the two always went together, and there was no bad habits. Yeah, I think I think it's a real opportunity. And of course, if there is an opportunity for awareness training, I'm speaking to the right person, aren't I? I mean, what? Just talk me a little bit through your career, and let's talk about. I know that in the early days that you did a lot with security architecture and transformation projects and that type of thing. So were you educated in technology and security? I mean, how did it work? Tell me about the early days, and we'll come up to what you're doing now. Smashing it out of the park now. But anyway, let's go early.
Yeah, it's actually quite a funny story because I didn't, I actually wanted to study art. Like, I was always into art and I was always drawing, and my dad just said, no, there's no money in it. And then I'm like, you know, okay, well, I like languages. And he said, no, there's no money in it. And then I ended up doing like an international economics kind of business at a business school in Munich. And part of that business school was like doing internships abroad. And I just, again, by coincidence, my brother lived in Singapore. So I applied to all the kind of German companies in Singapore, and the only companies that were interested in taking me as an intern was the German telecom and like a chemical company. And I just liked the lady more at the telecom thing, and that's how I got into telecommunications, I guess. And this was 2000 or 99. So there wasn't even, I mean, I still had to go to the library and, you know, do my research. They didn't even have internet. But through that internship, I then got the opportunity to work at Siemens instead of waitressing. And then they kind of offered me to write my thesis in, I think it was mobility, CRM, and security. And that's how back then, you know, like I got sort of in touch with security. But again, I obviously did like a business degree, or it's a BA equivalent. And then I also ended up having to go to South Africa for an internship. I loved it here. And through the Siemens kind of work or my thesis, I ended up getting a job at Internet Solutions, which is like a local service provider. And I was sort of the interface between the developing or the product developers, engineering, and the business side. And that's how I got into it. So more by accident, I suppose, or coincidence. But my background is definitely actually not technical. I mean, I had to, and I felt that quite, you know, it's also being a woman or a girl back in the day, and not even, you know, I was like a stranger because I was in Johannesburg. I was just 21. So I felt really sort of out of my comfort zone. But and I had a headache every day because I came back home and had to Google all the terms and learn the English.
But I know you, and I know that that would be the type of challenge that you would certainly, I mean, I'm sure, but at the age of 21, the type of challenge that you would have embraced and made a point to do of doing that every night and getting to know it. I know you would.
Yeah, it was an adventure, and I mean, Jenny, I think if you like learning, and I think that's sort of that what I enjoy most. And security is an area where you constantly learn. And I mean, I spent all my weekends reading, and I did, I just couldn't get enough of it because it also spanned so many areas, and then yeah, and I also was lucky that I always met really great guys on that team who showed me or taught me things. And
it was men at the time, right?
Yes, yeah.
Because I know now you're interested in bringing young women in and promoting that, aren't you? And it's supposed to make their journey a bit easier.
Yeah.
Yours.
And yeah, I mean, that's also in some way, even though it was very male dominated, but I was also talking about this the other day that I had an advantage being like this young, sort of naive girl at the time because they weren't threatened by me. Like often the techies, I find they have these little contests, who knows more, and especially in meetings. And then I just come along and I say, look, I don't know anything, please, you need to help me.
It's a good strategy. If you couldn't plan it, could you? That's almost social engineering in a way, except it's not deceptive. It's just like, I don't know anything, so tell me everything.
Yes, no,
that's
exactly.
Good.
And it worked quite well. I mean, in the beginning, at least, especially when you're younger. I mean, now it's a bit, it's different, but that helped. And I think that the guys, they were just also brilliant. They were really helpful and good people that I learned from. And yeah, and then I sort of like just through and feeling probably insecure as well because I didn't have a technical background. I felt I had to learn harder and study more to keep up with the guys and be able to competently, compete with them or supposed to be on the same level. I put a lot of effort in catching up. So I did a lot of certifications in the beginning of my career, like the typical CISSPs and CISA and like the ISO ones and like a whole bunch of security stuff, the TOGAF architecture things. But yeah, and then very shortly after I sort of joined Internet Solutions, they obviously saw, okay, this girl likes to study or work hard or whatnot, and then they subcontracted me to a company called Dimension Data, where I then at 25 became sort of the main architect for their managed security services program. And then I had to move back to Europe for them. And basically, I remember turning 25 and I was responsible for Sweden, the Netherlands, and Germany, and running that region as like this youngster and celebrating my birthday in a trucker hotel somewhere in Sweden. I'm like, this is also not what it's all made out to be.
But this is all of these experiences. This is one of the reasons that I wanted you on the show and I wanted to talk to you again, because I think one of the qualities that I see in you and is that work ethic, that you really worked really, really hard and you didn't feel entitled to anything. And, that just really came through when you and I kind of spoke a few years back and looked at a few things. That was one of the reasons that I liked you guys so much, was because I could see that this had been built from, you say from nothing, but it kind of was. I mean, you built Popcorn from, it was a startup, right? You started it. And just to say before, because I want you to tell me the story about Popcorn and how you did it and what you did, but I can see that interest in art and design, plus the sort of economics coming into the Popcorn story, because you had such an eye for the story and for the visuals. I remember looking at some of them vids and thinking that this is just really well shot. So tell me about Popcorn.
Yeah, so I ended up then working for Dimension Data. They are South Africa's largest sort of IT integrator. And then so I worked for them in Europe, and then I came back to South Africa, actually back and forth a couple of times. Anyway, long story short, I met my current husband, and he's the main reason why I ended up staying in Cape Town. And throughout like the whole career that I worked at Dimension Data, and I did various things like architecture and even, you know, audits and sort of networking designs and all sorts that you would find at a typical integrator. I always felt that, you know, like the human factor wasn't really, and this is like 10 years ago, even longer, that, you know, that the companies would have some posters up and that was the awareness program, you know, and I just had this dream that I thought, because I always loved drawing, and I said, can't I like create a cartoon story that explains security to normal or non-technical people? And in fact, while we went on honeymoon, I actually drew the whole storyboard of like pretty much 6 modules while Gizzy was sailing. And then I took it back to the customer I was based on site at the time, Old Mutual. They're one of our biggest insurance companies. And I just showed them, I said, look, I did this sort of on honeymoon, and I want to like record it now and have like a story done. And they like, oh my God, Anna, this is brilliant. You must do this. And don't just do the whole thing, but cut it in different modules. And by the way, you need to build a learning management system. And back in the day, you know, it was like, yeah, and it needs to be in .NET and sit on site. I'm like, oh God, you know. So I asked around and my friends, like, who can code in .NET, and had no idea about learning management systems, which was also good because it, you know, when you approach something with like a fresh mind, you really created how you wanted, not what the LMS people might think. And we created this little platform that was super simple. It was like a YouTube, we called it Secure Tune, like YouTube for security awareness, and created the content basically with the customer because they guided me a lot, you know, in terms of what they felt they needed. And that's how it started. So it was just this little side project. And then luckily, you know, I was quite clever to say, well, this is my intellectual property. So I could take the same thing to other companies, and sort of by word of mouth, you know, they all kind of liked it. And then we created content together. Like I had an Old Mutual and another company, Sanlam, sitting together, and we came up with their bring your own device policy content. And
I mean, I remember seeing one where one of the vids, because we worked together a little bit on some content in the early days, didn't we? Or a few in the early days. It feels like forever with the pandemic a few years ago. But I remember looking at some of the content and the way that you translated it, and like you wrote in very strong female characters at the time. I remember seeing the hacker was female, and she was sort of catfishing this guy and flattering him, because we talked about flattery, and I loved it. And I remember saying to you, I really liked the way that you did that one. And you can see you could see your touches all over Popcorn. That was my point. You know, I could see Anna in touching these things and making sure that it was done in a certain way. I always thought that was very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, and in the beginning, it literally was. I mean, I even tried to do, right in the beginning, I drew the first characters, came up with the story, and even tried to do my own animation. And then, you know, that's a whole skill on its own. So luckily I found some really good guys that, they're actually a couple, they're still with us. They do the animations. And just grew from there. And then you learn, you know, like with every customer, there's a new challenge. Like it's also in the beginning, they said, oh no, we can't even stream video over the WAN because the bandwidth was so bad. So then we had to come up with a solution where we installed the videos literally on site on the users' desktops. And then that little application, then once they watch the content, would then, you know, like talk back to the server and do the quizzes. So, you know, it had to be really innovative. And then obviously now everything's in the cloud. But that was in the beginning, you know, where we had to be on site. And and then I think the biggest sort of stepping or milestone that helped was to get onto Gartner's Magic Quadrant. So we made it on Gartner's Magic Quadrant 3 years in a row, and that put us on the map. You know, then obviously our main market was still just South Africa, but we then had a couple of international clients, and that's how Nova4, you know, in fact Perry, who was the Gartner Magic Quadrant analyst, he moved to Nova4, and obviously we knew each other from the years before, and then that's how the contact happened.
So Perry's eye turned to you, and there we go, and since then you've grown it by what is it, a couple of 100% or something? You've grown the business.
Yeah, I mean, we were acquired in 2018, and we were 9 people, sort of the permanent staff. I mean, obviously we work with a lot of freelancers as well, but those were 9 people in the core team. Now we've got 30 in South Africa or in Africa.
So as someone who's an entrepreneur who's started that business and put all that hard work in, tell me, what does it feel like when you got that call and that offer, that first time that they communicated with you and said, you know, we're interested in acquiring Popcorn? How does it feel?
It felt good, but also crazy. It was totally not what I expected, because we started conversations with Perry, and it was more about maybe they can license some of our content. And I didn't look forward to the call, because I discussed it with my husband, and he's like, why would you want to license your content to the competition? You know, then you don't get much for it, but you're giving your competition all your IP. And I was like prepared to say, sorry, Perry, as much as I love working with you, and I think KnowBe4 is amazing, but you still competitors, and it's actually going to be no. And then they dropped the ball in that call to say, well, you know, how about, would you be open to get acquired? And it was quite interesting, because at that point in time, I just did like a handshake agreement with somebody locally to become like a private equity investor, because since like everything was self-funded, you know, it was totally bootstrapped, like some money from our bond account to start initially, and worked on the side to not draw a salary in the first few years. So it was very hard work and sweat, you know. And so this guy wanted to come in and invest some money and like scale us to the next level. And then I had to tell him, look, I just got that opportunity. And he actually then helped me to with the negotiations, and got somebody in to help me with that, which was also, that's a whole, I mean, you know, negotiations, that's a whole different area of life that was totally new to me and very interesting to learn, you know.
Hard work though. It's hard to do. It's hard to do emotionally, and to stay tough on the business but warm with the people, is what we say, and it's a big ask.
Yes,
it's a
and
difficult
it was good
thing.
that I had somebody who did that, so I could sort of remove myself. And he was the bad cop in a way, negotiating, and I was like, you know, I could stay in the background.
I keep disappearing with this light. So it's just not right, and the lighting's really bright today. It's really bright outside, and it's normally not, and so I look like I'll have to adjust it all. So now, obviously, Popcorn's part of the KnowBe4 business, but you're trying to promote careers in cybersecurity and women in cybersecurity within all over the continent, but South Africa particularly. So talk to me a bit about what you're passionate about at the moment and those things that you're trying to promote, because we're going to try and help where we can on the show and talk to some of the people that you're working with as well, and the conference. So tell me about that side of what you do, Anna.
Oh, awesome. So I think, you know, since I have this new role now, like before that I was the MD, and you're just so busy every day, just, you know, keeping your head over water and running the business. So in my new role, because evangelism is part of the kind of raising awareness, obviously brand awareness, that's the main thing. But what is beautiful about it is that it allows me to look at more kind of social opportunities and do things that are for the greater good, you know. And one thing that we did was, in fact, with a couple of other African ladies, we call ourselves the Cyber Herons. And we did a little survey just on social media, and like literally just a Google form, and then shared it, and it went a little bit viral. Like we had 500 responses from, well, I mean, viral, you know, like in that sense. Like we asked teachers on the ground, basically in the schools, to say, what can we do to inspire more African girls to join the cybersecurity industry in particular? And what was really interesting, the feedback that came back from all these teachers was that, you know, internet is a problem. Like a third of the students actually don't have internet access at home. And so the second thing that came out of that survey, that was really interesting, is that we need to showcase role models. So really show the girls that it is cool to be a woman, and to, you know, you can be very, very much a female and be successful in technology, especially an African female. And basically what came out of this whole exercise is that we're not trying to like in a way profile some of the existing African cyber heroines and put them up on like a, like create little videos about them and then share those profiles with the teachers on the ground so that they can show it in the classrooms with guidance on how to, possibly pursue a career, where to go to learn more about it, get access to mentorship. So really kind of make it more cool to be a girl and join the cybersecurity industry. So that is one of the initiatives. The other thing that we've started, which is it's another really cool thing that just sort of happened, is we did one of these like press roundtables where you discuss with the industry about how to make the government more digital and whatnot. And I know, like in Europe or even in the States, there's a lot of awareness happening from the government side and a lot of support for the kids to become digital in general, and especially also even the girls. But that's not happening here, or not to the extent that we need it. And part of the discussion was, okay, what can we do to help the government? And my kind of view was that we can't sit here and just point at the government and expect them to do it. They don't have the skills. We can't even find the skills, in the industry. So how can we expect them to do it? And they have so many other problems to fight. So why don't we get together and as an industry with the universities and the government and come up with ways together? So we're launching this GovX, kind of like the Prize X initiative. I don't just want to call it a hackathon because it's more than that. It's like an innovation challenge where we as the industry come together. We've got some sponsor moneyship, and then we'll guide the students through a process where they can then help to do two things. Help the government to come up with better cybersecurity sort of incident response capacities to help victims of cybercrime and raise more awareness. And B, and this is another thing I'm quite strongly believe in, is to help address gender-based violence online, which is a thing that's not at all even discussed in Africa. And it is actually, it's a huge thing. And it again prevents the woman of entering, like there was a study by a group called I think Policy. They did like a feminism study across Africa, and they found out that 39% of the women feel unsafe going online because they're being harassed, because they're being
stalked and bullied,
or they experience gender-based violence in the cyberspace. And I mean, gender-based violence is a massive problem on the continent in the physical world, but it just kind of transacts into the cyberspace as well, and we have to do more about that.
Well, I think they're amazing initiatives, and we've got this is going to go out before the African Cybersecurity Culture Conference, which I've been typing, trying to share, that I'm going to speak at, that you're going to speak at, and that we've got lots of other fab speakers joining it. And that's one of the things that another thing that you've got going out there, and that's obviously, you see the advantages in a way of everyone working from home and these conferences being completely digital now, is that maybe we can reach more people and get some of the messages of some of the people in the conference out there. So we'll definitely put the link to the conference, and I'll put it across the screen now, and we'll also put some links in the show notes so that people can see that. And that's on the 11th of November, and is free for people to watch, right?
Yes, it's completely free. And Jenny, I mean, you put the nail on the head, is that it's a difficult, tough situation, the whole pandemic, but it also opens up so many opportunities for us to work together more, to collaborate and solve problems on a global scale. I mean, the security industry is actually relatively small, even on a global level. I mean, we met each other a couple of years ago, and then there's it's really nice to be able to tap into which before that might have been difficult, because to get you out here, it's a long trip, and even though we would have loved to have you here in person, but it's so much quicker and easier now to get access to talent like as yourself and other really amazing security, call them heroes, and then get them to support like sort of bigger issues, so
I mean, I always wanted to put, show my support for what you guys were doing out there, because there was the social side of it, and I met so many great people. I mean, I know you know Confidence, and Confidence is on the show. She's been on the show as well, and you know the work that she's doing, and the way that she's promoting it. So there's so much going on out there. But listen, Anna, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you on the show, even if the gremlins got us halfway through. And I'm looking forward to the conference on the 11th, and I'm working with you guys as best I can. You know, we will certainly support the conference and the speakers on the show and try and put a bit of a spotlight in some of those voices out there. So thank you for what you've done, and you know, let's hope that people see this and it helps promote it even more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's lovely to speak to you, Anna. Take care. Bye bye now.
Bye bye.